Great. We are now streaming live on YouTube as well. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Reputation Today Prime Time on the social media influence of communicators. This edition of RT Prime Time is presented in association with The Practice, a full-service public relations firm. Last week, Reputation Today, in partnership with The Practice, released a study of 100+ communication professionals, highlighting their presence and engagement on Twitter and LinkedIn. This study can be seen at bit.ly RT Smile 101. The panel today consists of 4 senior professionals who featured in the study, and the discussions today will focus around the social media influence of communicators. A warm welcome to all our panelists and the 145+ registered participants who will be logging in today using Zoom. This session is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel at bit.ly Reputation Today on YT. So if you are facing any issues connecting to Zoom, you can always switch to YouTube, but without the option of asking any questions. For those who are attending using Zoom, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A box, and the moderator will try to pick as many as she can in the last 15 minutes. Please avoid using the chat box for this. Before I introduce our panelists, let me remind you, the hashtag for today is RT Primetime. Please tweet using the hashtag RT Primetime, and don't forget to tag our partner at TPR India along with Rep Today Mag. I would now like to introduce and welcome our panelists for today. Ankit Vengurlekar, Associate Director for Communications and Public Relations at Xiaomi India. Vandana Shenoy, Director Corporate Communications at Oracle India. Varsha Chainani, Senior Vice President Group Communications at Mahindra & Mahindra. And Vineet Handa, Founder and CEO at Kaizen. And moderating the panel today is Yamini Reddy, Account Director, The Practice. Over to you, Yamini, now to steer this conversation ahead.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Anubhuti, for that introduction. So I think a lot of people know everyone in this panel. So without further ado, I'd like to kick off. Firstly, thank you all for joining me today on RT Primetime for this special. And thank you to the entire team to put this together. So we'll start off with Ankit. So let me start with you. You know, you're quite active on social media. Recently, we've seen you've been posting a lot about Kanush, which is something that's very close to you. How important, if you could tell us, how important has social media, really been in terms of influence and influencing an audience and the kind of mileage you've been able to receive through this?
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for having me and for putting me in the firing line, first of all, Yamini. Thanks for starting with that. It's fantastic to be on this panel with some really experienced ones. I'm the youngest of the lot, so to say, in terms of PR experience. But my journey on social media has actually gone through multiple iterations because I've been a science and tech journalist for most of my life, which is close to 16, 17 years. And so I've used that as a journalist, part of the newsrooms in very different ways. And now as a PR professional, I use it in completely different ways. But I think the curious balance is the way I try to use social media for personal reasons or personal motivations and professional reasons and outcomes. And the latest sort of example, which I still don't understand how it went completely viral on Twitter, was the instance of me helping my home cook, Saroj Didi, set up a home food catering business just literally out of the lockdown because she was facing major financial pressure. And that's how we partnered with a platform called Kanosh to sell home cooked food. It's a platform for home chefs. So it has been majorly extremely positive and gratifying for me, my time on social media. And that may not be the experience of everybody who's even attending this talk or people in the panel. But I am of the firm belief, call it naive or whatever you may, but I'm of the firm belief, as you sow, so shall you reap. So I personally engage in and generate a lot of positive, optimistic conversations on social media. And so largely the kind of people who interact with me, they sort of bring that vibe to the conversation as well. Of course, it's social media and a lot of negative elements exist there as well. Fortunately, mute, block, all of that comes in really, really handy. And, there's this beautiful book by Mark Manson, I think that's the name of the author, The Subtle Art of Giving a Beep, Ever since I've read that, and ever since one has grown older in one's 30s, I've become ruthless, absolutely ruthless with the use of mute and block buttons to keep that space. It's sanctum sanctorum for me. So to keep it of a certain tone and tenor.
No, makes sense. Thank you for that. I think you brought up a really interesting point on your personal and professional lines. So I think that's a really interesting concept, right? Is there a need to have that blurred? I mean, there are lots of blurring lines today, I believe. And with platforms, it's also changing as well, right? Vandana, maybe if you could help answer this, as a professional, you've really been through it all from the agency side to the corporate side. You've seen communication evolve and then influence change as well with social media coming into the picture. So as a communication professional, is there a necessity to keep those lines very clear? And if you could share your views on that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel, and it's great to hear everybody else's, views on social. It's, I think, a different world that we exist in today. So, see, when you scan social media, if I might start, when you scan the social media landscape, as individuals, we've all created our personas. We've voluntarily published our professional credentials. Be it on LinkedIn, be it on Twitter, Facebook, and of course, a variety other channels. With that comes responsibility. Okay, now as PR professionals, as communicators, as communications practitioners, we have a mandate to support business goals of organizations or the clients we serve. And that mandate necessarily doesn't restrict to just external communications. There's sales, there's R&D, there's HR, there are a whole lot of things. But in the external domain, we are the brand custodians. It is our responsibility to make sure we are delivering the right message to our audiences. So how does that really fit in as communicators? Where do we draw the line? Because we have a professional persona, but we also have a personal persona. And, as Ankit mentioned, you post something which others may not like. You got to be prepared to face what comes with it. You need responsibility. Like I said, we've published our credentials externally, and voluntarily, we got to be able to own up to how we react to these. And the more you get drawn into these discussions online, you're just not able to put an end to it. So you got to be smart in deciding how much of that you want to pursue and how much of that you take offline. So one would be, one is the responsibility clearly that we all have as a comms function, and also as a comms function, we also have the opportunity to define the social media participation guidelines for organizations. And it's important that we practice it as communication practitioners ourselves. And given that, that is your day job, it is important that you restrict what you do during the day to reflect what your organization demands of you. And you can choose how your social presence is. It doesn't always mean that you got to be active. I'm not as active definitely as Ankit is, but clearly there is a whole lot of other things that are happening in the communication space where social media comes into play. You can be an influencer, perhaps like as Ankit is, or you could be someone who's just an observer, a passive observer, just contributing to information. And how you do that is by making sure you're driving a communication plan, you're amplifying, the brand's stories as relevant as you can. Use your executives, your leadership to propagate that message. It doesn't always have to be you, but you can drive a large community of brand ambassadors within your organization to do that. It's not just PR that owns this, it's every employee.
Right. No, that's a great point. Just taking from that, I think you brought up 2 points that I'd like to touch upon. And Varsha, I'd like to kind of direct this question at you. One was responsibility, right? As an individual, coming from that sense. And I know you also, work for a company and a CEO who's extremely active, and you could say more people learn from him to tweet and to send out messages. So there's a huge responsibility aspect I get, especially from a brand side. But what about from a personal side, right? Because when you're talking about, so Varsha, specifically for you, I know you're extremely active on LinkedIn. You're a leadership coach. You're also part of the Global Women in PR group. So in terms of that responsibility, right? Is there a reason to deflect and also not just share things that are related to the company, but also you as an individual, as a professional. And then the follow-up question to that is also networking on LinkedIn, because I know you do a lot of that. So how important is that for public relations professionals today?
Sure, they're almost like 3 questions, but let's take the first one, right? Which is around how do we look at personal, and given that the CEO or the chairman is so active, how do you look at personal and a balance between the professional life? So I think given that our jobs are intensive, we have access to emails now 24/7. Both we have work account, personal account of that, WhatsApp messages, SMSs. I think it just is exhausting only to manage that, right? And then comes the other social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Insta, and it can be really exhausting to decide which ones to be really a part of, and when do you really actively engage and hence have a network that you can leverage as well. So I think those, I'm combining now your questions, but that's truly important, that even between these platforms, even if you see that there are different norms and behaviors, it becomes a cliche while, you know, from an Instagram perspective, to show off on how enviable your life is. And on Twitter, sometimes negativity gets the better of many discussions. It's hard to kind of manage all of these personalities. And at the end of the day, your persona, and if we are true to who we are as communicators, then authenticity is something that runs within, and your social persona is exactly what your otherwise persona is, whether it's at work or your personal life. Taking from Mr. Anand Mahindra, and I'm really, it's a pleasure to represent a company like Mahindra. I think there is one thing that I've learned is focus. He focuses truly on Twitter, and that's his go-to social media, not because he can build his profile there or his persona there, but it truly is a dashboard for him to manage his businesses, which are so diverse and you know, across the globe. So he gets feedback from the hearty and what's happening and how a price tag on a product does not seem appropriate, to helping somebody in a video that was posted by somebody in the community, and you know, and that he believes in that cause and hence he wants to support. So I think it's very important to understand why is it that you're using what, and what do you want at the end, you know, from that particular engagement. So I think all of those important decisions need to be made in advance, so that way you're able to leverage social media uniquely. I am active on LinkedIn, I'm active on Facebook. Insta, my daughter really forces me to kind of say, you do have followers, leverage it better, but really, you know, time doesn't allow you to do that as much as, you know, we like to. Another part, and something that Vandana talked about, I think we also have a responsibility of not overhyping or over showcasing the organization, because that does have a way of putting off some of the readers, you know, social media audiences. So I think there is a balance that we need to draw there as well. So with that, I think back to you, Yamini.
Sure, almost a balance between marketing and sales, like, versus being authentic and really talking about why it's important for you. I think taking from that, you know, the interesting aspect of, do you stick to one platform? Do you shift and adapt with time? Because just in the past 5 years, we've seen, you know, this LinkedIn that's been constant. We've seen Twitter, we've seen Facebook, we've seen, you know, Snapchat, now Instagram, TikTok. The needs from, you know, Kaizen's been around for around 11 years now, 11 years old. On the agency side, it's very different. We always advise clients to say, this is the new platform. This is where you need to be present. These are your stakeholders. How is that different for individuals? And you yourself, as the CEO, would you say it's important to shift with the trend, or keep to, what you committed to and kind of work with that?
Oh, a great question. So probably I'm, Yamini, first of all, thanks to Amit Prabhu, Reputation Today and Practice especially to have me on board. And why this is a special thanks, because, Practice and Kaizen both PR agencies, and, a PR agency sponsoring other PR agency person. Of course, there is a gap between these two, but still having me on board is really appreciable, and I'm really thankful to you. Now coming back to your question of different platforms, and whether one should move on or one should stick to. So it's like at least personally, the way I have sort of grown up in the social media side. So a little background, hardcore PR guy. I used to actually demotivate clients to go on social media, because I felt it's a threat to PR, and I'm like a PR guy, right? Or old school PR guy. Now, what I have started doing, I myself have, and it's an interesting aspect to the whole conversation, right? We have a whole digital team. So I say, okay, social media or our digital side is a good complement to the traditional PR. And I believe this is more relevant right now. And I think it does make sense. Now, I personally started as an observer, and I think Vandana spoke about it. And, we all look at, so it was more of a one-way communication where you're observing. I used to spend half an hour on Facebook as I'm watching a TV and just looking at it. It's just a different format of a medium for me to get more stuff and things like those. So I think that's where it all started. And then you slowly started looking at what's happening around. There are times when you sort of look into something, you like something, you sort of like it. There are friends around. So, that's how you sort of grow up. Now, where we are right now, I mean, say year 2020. First of all, I believe pandemic has really helped everybody. And I think LinkedIn has been the most beneficial when it comes to pandemic. I think I have noticed at least 100 odd people doing a hygiene updates. So I'm like, at least 20 of them I probably can count right now who have changed their profiles. And I'm sort of like a fool going and congratulating them. They said, no, I joined there 6 months back, but I'm now updating my profile. So the idea is pandemic has helped us to sort of really go back, relook, put in a hygiene stuff, and also made us active in certain platforms. So LinkedIn definitely, yes, one. Now, of course, there are two lives you live. One is a professional life and a personal life. I admire Mr. Mahindra for that he's the same in both lives. The values which he carries, is the same, whether it's on Twitter or any other platform. I'm sure he has the same. And I think that's the core of social media, whether you're on a LinkedIn or on Instagram, it's the same thing. You can't be two people. So you're the same person, and understand your audience is watching you on both the platforms. So even though the messaging could be different, but your values should come out same. So that's another part which I really talk about. Now, thirdly, changing the platforms. I think that's as an agency, what we really look at, it's changing, definitely. The people or the brands who were pretty active on say, Facebook, now for them, Insta is the place. And that sort of moves on. And I think today it's Insta, probably 5 years down the line, there could be something else. So I'm just saying this is going to be an ongoing journey, and one has to really look at the changing trend and follow that route. And I think there's no harm. So Facebook becomes more, now Facebook, I believe, is more friends and family kind of a place. Mm-hmm. Insta is more, where you want to catch up, acquire, quick, fast, very sort of a trendy, not very complex, only 3 icons. You can do only 3 things on Insta, and that's how. So I think it's a very, very fast moving phase, and you need to move on with the the trend. So I think that largely that's the way I really personally look at it. As far as now, the larger messaging for people on social media, whether they should look at all social media in the same manner. How do they differentiate between personal and professional? Ankit spoke about this very clearly, that there has to be some sort of a line. And I personally, what I have done is Facebook is personal, Insta is probably more nature, more love for photography and things like those. And LinkedIn remains professional, where we really talk about. It is very interesting. LinkedIn is also where you really look at your client side matter. Now, I'm just talking from other side because I'm sitting in agency, and I have to also look at the client side. And I think that's where people really talk about that, how you become a small micro influencer and start talking about certain topics, certain industries, certain also and many a times certain causes which you are sort of can relate with. So I think that's how you sort of differentiate all these platforms.
So truly keeping LinkedIn at the core of like your professional realm, but then using your other platforms to kind of, in a very subjective way, based on personal preference, really.
Sure.
Okay. Ankit, I'd love to hear from you on, what's a right, or if there is a term called right social media mix, and are there any, no-go zones? We talked about this briefly yesterday, but I think it's a really interesting topic. Are there any no-go zones? And, what do you do specifically for yourself? And is there a trend that you're seeing within young professionals as well today?
Well, the trend that I see within young professionals in PR and comms is that they're not using social media enough, which is an unfortunate trend. It's almost like they've taken it for granted because it's all pervasive, it's everywhere. So they feel it's okay to not dip into this stream of information, right? For early adopters like us, we have an intrinsic sense of FOMO built in, fear of missing out, that, I don't want to miss out on whatever the new platform is. And in fact, to what Vineet, Vandana, and Varsha were saying, Sir Charles Darwin gave us the most incredible, sort of phrase, survival of the fittest. And I feel in PR and comms today, it is survival of the quickest. If you're not quick enough to pivot or adapt to the latest platform, and, doesn't mean you have to be on board with it for a long period of time. But try, experiment, play with it. If it works for you, if the ROI is good enough for you, the metrics matter to you, stay on and reinvent your content strategy or comm strategy for it. But you have to try it for you to know whether it's going to work for you or not going to work for you, and then discard it, right? So survival of the quickest. If there's one thing that I would like any of the viewers to take home today, it would be survival of the quickest. And a lot of times, I know exactly what Varsha said, oh my God, there's so many things. And just managing your notifications and accounts is a full-time gig in itself. I wish somebody just paid us to look at our notifications and respond to it. And unfortunately, in consumer-facing brands, I'm sure, I don't know if Varsha gets that as well, but as someone who works in Xiaomi, I'm inundated with customer care requests, this is not working, customer care didn't respond to that. And I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? So definitely, I think, so one is the no-go zone. I think no-go zone personally or for a brand would be if you don't really understand something, don't spend too much time trying to figure it out. There was a whole period of time where I really desperately tried to figure out about 3-4 years ago what Snapchat was. And I was like, no, if my 34, 35-year-old gray cells don't understand the UI UX here, it's for a reason, because it's meant for 16-year-olds. It's not meant for 34-year-olds. So I'm not supposed to get it. So get off it. Quora is coming up as a really formidable sort of alternative, not exact alternative, but, another platform vis-a-vis LinkedIn. And there are comms teams that are building very credible presence of brands or product managers who actually become voices, credible voices and influencers on Quora itself. There's Reddit there's Telegram, there's Signal. There are so many platforms, right? So really have to understand. Varsha's like, oh yeah, there's so many more.
Amazing.
Yeah, so the point is, you really have to understand who your audience is, where are they mostly huddling up and hanging out in, and where is your biggest catchment size and catchment area and constituency, right? That's from a professional point of view. From a personal point of view, unfortunately, everybody's ambition in life today is to become an Instagram influencer. That word has lost all meaning. It has lost all gravitas because of people abusing what they do with the medium, right? So I would say, do only what you do, whatever sparks joy. That's it. To quote Marie Kondo, does this spark joy? And if anything, to again, cite Marie Kondo, bring in as much minimalism as possible onto it. There's a fantastic book called by Cal Newport. It's called Digital Minimalism. I recommend it like the Bible to anybody who's in the comms business or social business. Cal Newport also writes a fantastic book on just working, what a most effective way to work, especially in a work from home environment with so many distractions, etc. So check out Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, but only stay on medium that spark joy for you. It's okay to miss out on certain other platforms. I deleted my Facebook profile about 3.5, 4 years ago, and I haven't, looked back into it. I keep taking digital detox, which are anything between 4 weeks to 6 month breaks from Instagram. And people are like, oh my God, you have such a big following there. Why do you keep going off the platform? And my simple answer to them is, I'm on the platform for me. I'm not on the platform for someone else. And if I need to take a break, जैसे लोग उपवास रखते हैं, मैं digital या social media उपवास करता हूँ, because I need that weaning off period. There's too much of bombardment of information all the time. And there is no precedence to this, Yamini. Right. No other generation has grown up with the kind of tsunami of information and constant signaling notification. It's one dopamine hit after the other. It's ridiculous. Another person we should, probably hear talk is Tristan Harris, Center of Humane Development of Technology. He was the chief ethicist at Google before this, and he quit Google because he confessed that big tech is designed to be as addictive as gambling in a casino, and I am not okay with this as an ethicist. So he went on to, found an NGO which is all about ethical design of social media products that are far more addictive than any other addiction out there in the world. So a whole bunch of ideas there. I hope some of it answered your question.
No, absolutely. I think great. A lot of reading material, I think, for a lot of the viewers out there. But also very valid, I think, with the entire number of notifications, the whole concept of always being on. I feel like, especially with the whole work from home scenario, you're forced to almost always be available, and more so than when you were before, the lockdown. Vandana, we've talked about this as well. You've been around, you're fairly quiet. I would say a little social media shy. You spoke about being fairly active during Oracle Open World, but now with everything, right? The numerous platforms, constant notifications that I think everyone's talked about. How much is too much? Is there fatigue that's setting in? You also see a lot of communication professionals who are actively helping brands with their digital strategy, even management of pages and all of those aspects. So is there a fatigue that sets in that also maybe then people don't want to connect? They don't, and Ankit, to your point, you see very few professionals actually being active on social media, which you said is a shame, but is that one of the reasons for it?
So Yamini, I think the fatigue factor is a personal, it needs to be personal to the individual. And I'm sure the fatigue quotient would be more relatable to Ankit, given he's the most active amongst most of us on this panel. But clearly, I think as comms professionals, we have a duty to be active to a certain extent on social media. As the ones who are the protectors or, the ones to nurture a brand, it is essential that we are active in some shape and form. But I wouldn't say that it's something we stop. I think it's a judgment call we can take, as to how much activity we want to drive, how much of visibility you want to drive. And like Ankit said, there could be some things we can do, but there could be things we don't need to do. So define what those criteria and metrics would be. I mean, there are a few things I do. I'll say when I decide to, in fact, in my journey, while we've learned and evolved with social media, there are some things that I keep in mind, when I think of anything. One is to be attentive, well-researched, know your readers, know your customer, know your competition. Ankit alluded to this to a certain extent. It's okay if you don't react sometimes, but be sure of what you're doing. It is important and essential that you are aware of what you're stating, with better research. Never be impulsive in what you do. And the way we operate, and I mentioned this very briefly in an earlier point, that there is an expectation of an immediate response, but you might be just doing more harm than good, and serving the purpose. The third thing I would say is in times of crisis, buy time, make sure to understand what the scenario is before you react. And the last point I'd say was, would be like when a conversation starts, you might be trolled, you might receive negative commentary, you decide when to switch off. It doesn't help for you to publicly continue a conversation. It serves no good. It's not helping your brand. It's not helping you. And the last thing, and I think I'll add on to what Ankit mentioned about Marie Kondo, and just, be happy with what you do. I think you need just common sense, ultimately with what you do on social media. And I'd like to leave everyone with this one thought I came across, of course, while preparing for this panel. It's something that Benjamin Franklin said: tell me and I forget, teach me and I may, involve me and I learn. And I think the social media world has just made us, it's just learning continuously. So much of what Ankit mentioned, I hadn't even heard, I must admit, but it's also because of the industry, I guess I'm actively involved in. It's not consumer tech, but I think it's essential for us, to be involved, to learn, make our mistakes and bounce back.
Right. We actually have an audience question. Varsha, if you could maybe take a stab at this. To what extent do you adjust or cater your personal content for your audience as an individual?
I could do more of, but I do think of my audience and how they will react and what they want to hear. So for example, especially on Facebook and Insta, it is never about truly work. It's more, my experiences and experiments, both from, either running or painting and or traveling. I think it's really about piquing people's interest and being relevant, because I understand by even watching people and following people, sometimes some of the content is just like you roll your eyes and say, what is this person doing? And why is the person doing that? So I think I take some of those learnings and apply it with what I do, especially on LinkedIn. I think it's very, very important that what you share and what you talk about, what you like, really defines you and your persona. So important that you manage that persona carefully, because it takes a long time to build. And that is your persona. So just keep to it rather than getting skewed by trends and what other people are doing. I think stay true to who you are, what you want to showcase, and stay put. I think that truly helps. So yes, I do. I do tailor content for people.
Great. I think that's really good advice. Vineet, just speaking about this, agency, journalism, journalists, publications, just trying to find not really comparison, but you see today journalists taking a very active stance on LinkedIn. A lot of them, while they represent a publication, they're still very active, share their views on certain topics. Now, with them creating their own brand identity as individuals, is there a need for us as, from the agency side, young professionals, to also create our own brand?
Very interesting. So it's again, there are two sides of each coin, and the side which I'm representing is more sort of a balanced side. I always feel a PR professional is like a lawyer. So, so you need to be very careful when you really pick up a stance. You know, a stance which is socially relevant. So probably in environment, you can see that and you sort of talk about it. You look at hunger. There's a lot of issues. So you can actually take a stance on issues like this. But when it comes to the larger issues, for an example, um, okay, let's not take examples right now, but the idea which I'm trying to talk about is as a PR professional or as a lead, not at every level, but you know, as a lead, what when you have a responsibility to represent a client, an agency who would have multiple clients, and each of these clients are also watching you. So I think it's important to somewhere have that discipline where you understand and see this is a public information, and whatever you say goes public. You need to be a little sort of careful about it. That's my stance. I understand there are a lot of people who would still would want to sort of uh, be not worry about that and go ahead and talk about their views. It's their personal choice, but I think largely when you really look at it, and also the other aspect to the whole thing is because when you see something, you read something, you always know the half story. You do not know the other half. And until unless you really in a thick of that and you know both the halves, it's then you have all the. So for an example, you know, I as a company have decided that I would never ever work or promote or do anything to do with the tobacco or a smoking brand. That's the thing which done, nothing. And in a process, I have also had an opportunity to pitch in for some big awards which are sponsored by a tobacco brand and blah, blah, blah. I said, no, nothing doing, not taking that. So I'm just saying it's your stance, what you really take on, but it's always good as a PR professional, as an agency owner to be a little careful about things.
Fair enough. I think very valid. Now
Okay.
that we're talking about influence, right? I think as
Yamini, sorry to butt in, but I
Yes.
actually want to respond to what
Please.
Vineet said, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have been waiting to say this, but I completely have a divergent or a contrasting view compared to what Vineet said. And it's actually, I mean, it's a really old saying. I think Dr. Martin Luther King said this first, that staying silent is a massive privilege. And especially in today's day and age, if you are that privileged, if you are that entitled, that you choose to remain silent, in the times that we live in, which are so polarizing, which where fake news takes more precedence over actual facts, it's virtually impossible to know the balanced point of view from both points of view, right? And anyway, we are not television 9 p.m. news anchors to give a verdict on issues, etc. Here's what I think about this, especially as PR professionals, or any professional for that matter. I think, you know, in India, we do this a lot. Our entire being is defined by our jobs,
Okay.
which is so counterproductive, right? I am an individual first. I am Ankit Vingurlekar with a set of values and morals first, who is being employed by my current employer, right? I stand for a certain set of values and causes and initiatives, which I will stand for irrespective of who I work with. Plain and simple. I stand for, you know, feminism. I stand for kindness towards animals. I stand for climate change and the environment. Now, if there are massive developments happening around these subjects, I will not ever silence my point of view, and I will be as vocal as I physically can be on these subjects. Now, that I understand comes with a big cost, that there may be employers who may not want to employ me because I'm such a massively vocal person. Fortunately, I've always only aligned with employers who know what they're signing up for when they hire me. If they don't like it, they won't hire me, plain and simple. It does come at a big opportunity cost as well. But I feel, especially young professionals, we do not have the privilege anymore to stay silent. And it could be absolutely anything, the smallest of things, right? But where there's so much wrong happening all around us, I don't agree that we should stay silent. You're doing disservice. You can't call yourself a communications professional and not communicate and say what you feel.
Okay. So you're saying be unique, stand for what you stand, because you come first before any brand or any representation of a company in that way, shape, and form. Vineet, would you like to add something?
I understand that may not be a popular point of view at all, but that's okay.
So Ankit, just to when I started with the social issues are no go. There's nothing, so I talked about my own case study that as tobacco and smoking is no go for us, that's a no go zone. Similarly, there are social issues which we really stand for as a company, as an individual, and we do a lot around that. We make noise, we support them, we create all of that. At least half a dozen good NGOs, we do pro bono work. The reason is you support those causes. So the point which I'm trying to say is, as a professional, you also need to see two sides of the story, and every story has two sides. So for an example, I'm not gone ahead and commented on China. Understand? I understand that is that the topic which you should really drive into and create? I don't think so. There is a popular view, there is other side of the view as well, and then you sort of get into. So when I talk about as a social media and social media, the other thing which I personally feel, you get into these topics and you actually become sort of part of aate ki chakki, that's two sides, and you're sort of really struggling to go on and on and on and on, and people will drag you to the level where you say, oh, apologies, I'm quitting. So that's what social media also does to you. So I think that's where I'm coming from. Rest, yes, you have to be vocal. If you're not vocal, and it's important for a company lead to at least being vocal about the causes, about the issues which you really strongly feel about. That's what I would say.
Yamini, this is Varsha, and
yes,
just
Varsha,
just coming back on what Ankit said. Ankit, all the topics that you talked about were really aligned to general issues and very important issues, but something that your company will culturally support as well. And Vineet gave a very nice example of made in China, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and how would you then? That is a very relevant cause of an Indian, but would you then, as an employee, talk about that? Visibly and visually, you know what I mean, in both ways, which is tracked to you as an employee. You may not. So it all just depends on how smart you are.
I actually did. I took the bull by its horns. I don't believe in staying quiet because there's nothing wrong or anything to hide. I believe in addressing the elephant in the room, and I did. Very early days of this whole discourse, I did.
You may, but just think about it. As a communications expert, or a lead, I don't know how many employees you have, but just imagine if that issue was taken from an employee activism perspective, right? And you have this huge number of people gathering and say, we're not going to work for, Xiaomi because it's a Chinese enterprise example. I'm just is that something you want to really start as a movement? So I think one really needs to be a little more aligned to
that's actually a
organization,
great point.
Products and services.
No, that's actually a great point, Varsha. And the possibility of something like that or an uprising like that is remotely impossible because the India operation is a completely independent India operation. And people who've been associated with the brand for close to 6 years, they know this fully well. So of course, there could be rabble-rousers who could use that argument, but people who see facts may see that, the reality on ground is completely different. And that's exactly what I tried to put out through whatever content I made early on when this discourse was taking shape.
Sure. I was just trying to be a bridge between you and Vineet.
Yeah, I get it. I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for adding in, Varsha. Vandana, just a quick question for you. You've been extremely shy on social, but people still know you as somebody in the industry and the legacy that you bring with you as an individual. So does a mere number of followers dictate your influence, or would you look at other factors as an individual? Would you look at parameters like the quality of conversations, your engagement? How would you view this?
Yeah, so I think in the social media world, followers is one metric to definitely look at. But just
It's
the
the
number,
only
but
metric.
it's the only metric. But even within followers, I think you need to ascertain who of those are relevant really, who of those are helping amplify what you're talking about in the social world, who of those are in a position of authority, to be able to react and comment on what you're posting. But clearly I think in the field of comms, and I've seen some questions that have called out, do you divide the work that social media teams do and what traditional PR teams do?
Yeah.
So clearly I think my recognition in the industry is a large part of it is because of the work I've done in the traditional media space.
Mm-hmm.
But the lines are very fine between what you do in social and professional and in traditional media, simply because of the way media has evolved. Everybody accesses news on their phones, and that is social media. Some of us who come from the old school of thought still get excited looking at an article in the print newspaper, but the reality is those days are gone. Traditional media will never cease to be a very integral part of what communications professionals do. It lends a lot of credibility to the work they do. It's third party, and it has a longer shelf life, at least the online media world. So a lot of what you do in that territory, I think, adds to your visibility in the industry. But again, you still promote all of that using social media. You need to find a mix of both. It is impossible for you to be a comms professional and restrict what you do to either social or to traditional. It has to be both. So I think a lot of what you do in the traditional media world or in the traditional comms world also plays a role. And how you are really promoting and profiling, the executive leadership of your organization that you represent, where they're seen, what they're talking about, what they're commenting about, also adds, a lot of value to that. You're driving those conversations.
Yeah. So I think I have one last question, and we'll take questions from the audience. I would like to encourage you all to keep it specific to the influence of communicators and not so much brands, because that is really the theme that we're going for tonight. Now, this is an open question to each of you on the panel. When you're looking at influence and communication, looking at expanding your own team, now you have resumes, and we kind of alluded to this a little before we started this session. Your resume is the same, 3 years of experience, 3 years of experience. Who do you hire and why? Does social media and that activity on that, the kind of work that they're doing outside of just their realm of work, matter to you? And is that something that would influence your hire?
If I can take that quickly, it's a big resounding yes, it matters. Because it also shows the amount of effort an individual has taken to curate a certain social media online presence, because it's clearly just symptomatic of a person being passionate about either a platform or a certain kind of content or messaging and investing time and effort and money behind it, which is anyway a great kind of quality to look forward to in any potential hire.
Yamini, I can take it now, Varsha here. So yes, absolutely, it does matter. And what matters is their experience on earned media from a social media perspective. How are they able to? So it's not just marketing and their understanding of SEO and the likes. It's really, really about how they are uniquely going to bring in social media to our campaigns. How can we leverage a social media first campaign to begin with, right? Rather than leading with traditional media and social media being a part of that. So I think that experience is absolutely critical. Those are the kind of people that we're really looking at.
So Varsha, what I'm hearing more from a skill set, you're saying it's important for them to understand the platforms and how they work, but is it important for them to be also active on at least one social media platform? Is that something you would look at?
Completely. See, what you do and what you are, you can't differentiate. So if you don't leverage social media, then you can't really come up with a great campaign, because your insights and who's doing what, how can you do something really extraordinary well and different, differentiating, all of that comes from leveraging social media. So I think it's the other, which is not just being, but being active out there, contributing, being an engaged part of leveraging social media every time that you think of a campaign from a communication standpoint, which is really the peso model, right? Which is, yes, there is a paid part of it, but it has to be earned, social, and owned.
Okay.
And I'll allude to that, Yamini. Sorry, I'll allude to what Ankit and Varsha mentioned. See, as a communications person, you have to be a social media practitioner if you are expected to deploy any of those strategies into your comms program. And I'm hearing from some of the questions and some of the conversations that have happened in this panel of the fear of social media. And I think this is what we should be seeing in the young professionals, that they are willing to take that risk. We are living in a world where information is just so volatile. I mean, today there's one news, and next minute it could be something else, but you got to be prepared to react. And you'll get that only once if I might say, dirty your hands. You have to learn to use social media. I mean, there is no doubt about it. And if you haven't, you can't really do justice to your professional as a comms professional.
So it's almost, you would say, it's become mandatory for people to be active and be present and talk about what they're doing. So the world knows, in a sense, who they are as individuals.
Yeah. Okay. So the last word on this, we do not hire people from any other platform. LinkedIn is where the 100% hiring happening. So means if you're not there, you do not exist for us. Okay. So that's point number one. Point number two, as a communicator, as a PR professional, or as a communicator, social media is an integral part of the media mix. So there's no other go until unless, so for probably early days, we used to ask, okay, give me the names of the newspaper or you have read or you have understood. Now it's like, what do you know about social media, right? So these are the important aspects which you really look at people questioning, and how do you use them and things like that. So I think it's very, very clear that there is no go. Social media is must. One has to have their profiles. One has to have activities around there and create their own profiles over there.
Sure. We have an interesting question. It's posted Ankit, but I would actually love to hear everyone's perspectives on this. So as each of you all represent a specific sector and a brand, right? Vineet, I think you cover multiple sectors and wear many hats, but to the point being, if you represent one brand, is it okay to kind of talk about another brand if you're an advocate of them? Is that, I guess, is there a fine line that you don't cross? Is there, so how do you also stay unbiased is the question.
So I think, sorry, Ankit, I'm just quickly taking this. If we really look at last 6 months, there's so many brands themselves have crossed these lines. Right from Adidas tweeting, using Nike ad to promote the whole issue of, in US. So what I'm trying to say is one, you need to be larger than, a brand. You have to showcase that largeness. Point number two, which is important here, is if you believe in that particular cause and does not really go against the current client or engagement, then I think there's perfectly. In fact, nowadays the biggest rivalry is Coke Pepsi rivalry, and I think that's also blurring. Lines are blurring there. So I think the world understand the common grounds, and we need to look at that.
Right. think there were others in queue.
Ankit, do you want to go? Or I'm happy to otherwise.
Go ahead,
Varsha. Go ahead.
Okay, so yes, it's absolutely important. I think as we look at building thought leadership, and in that realm, if you were to long tail by leveraging somebody else's post and then getting your message, I think it becomes you actually then are engaging with that brand's followers as well. So it is really about knowing why you're doing what you are, and then leveraging somebody else's handle and somebody else's followers and representing your brand well. If you're able to do that, I think that's great. And a lot of people do this long tailing from a thought, but it has to be a platform that the rest of the world can engage you on as well. So it has to be a common platform. It can't be just about a brand. It's not about, Mahindra and Tata's or Godrej, or it's really not about just those conglomerates, but it's a central thing about, a particular platform, and then getting that discussion going and getting more engagement on that. But it's topic based.
Sure.
Ankit.
Okay, so I have always been an unbiased journalist, which is why I probably didn't last that long. Ouch, burn. But I continue to remain unbiased, and I may not, make those statements on social media, but my DMs are always open, and they're extremely active, and a lot of active conversations happen on personal messages or DMs. Also, the beauty of Xiaomi hiring me was they knew fully well I've been a journalist for 16 years, and which meant I am going to question everybody internally and externally. So that's the beauty of it. Manu Kumar Jain, our MD, says, which was one of the best things that, I got attracted to. He's like, your primary responsibility first as an employee is obligation to dissent. If you disagree with something, first come and express that. वाहवाही करने के लिए, तारीफों का पुल बनाने के लिए बहुत सारे लोग हैं. First thing is obligation to dissent. So I am unbiased internally as well and externally as well. Of course, what has changed with the role is, as a journalist, I could, make these statements large and grand publicly on social media. I cannot do that anymore.
Fair enough. Vandana, I actually have a separate question for you, if that's okay. I know we're running close to the end, so maybe last few questions. How important is it to stay true to your values as an individual? Companies have values, you abide by them as an employee, right? But you also have individual values that you kind of have to stick to. And how do you stay consistent with that in these very interesting times?
Yeah, see, that's the reflection of your social media presence, right? Of where you draw the line between your personal and professional presence online. But it is important, no doubt. You got to do your job, making sure that what you're doing in your personal space is not interfering or jeopardizing what your brand, what your organization stands for, or what you're doing as the communications leader for your brand. And if you're sure about that, I think it's fine. But it is essential for you to have, that personal and professional space, no doubt.
Sure. We'll just go quick there. I think a couple in the chat box for Q&As. I don't want to leave, hopefully don't leave too many people disappointed, so we'll ask them really quick. Quick takeaways for new age communication practitioners, what corporates are looking for and how should they prepare themselves for the competitive scenario? Varsha, do you want to maybe take that?
Sure. Have a clear line of purpose, why you exist, what you want to do, where you want to kind of move your career. How can the company help? How can you help the company? Social media becomes very, very critical, and experience around the kind of work that you've done, engaging influencers. Again, I keep saying from a communications end rather than only a marketing end, but knowing how to leverage them. I think all of those become pretty clear. And the hunger to do something new, right, and more and different. And how cued you are with the environment outside, externally, I think is very, very important. So how alive you are to life and environment around you, very important.
Vineet, for you, it says, oh, sorry, do you want to add something to that, or I have another question for you?
Okay, I just want to say, be original, be real, what you're doing there, you should also represent the same thing when you meet people in person. I think that's the core, because otherwise it's very derogatory, very difficult to make your branding.
Sure. So it's not a persona that you need to put on, but be your true self, because that's what will stand out and kind of last in the long run.
Sure.
Right. So another quick question for you. As we know, it's important to attract the right kind of people on our social media audience, but at the same time, we also know it's easier said than done. So how do we know who they are, where to find them, and how to attract them?
I think the content is king. If you have the right content, it would ultimately sort of drive that. And it's a chain reaction. See, there is plenty of people. There is, and I've heard this somewhere, one of the conferences in US, that there is a good data, there is a bad data, and in today's time, social media has a lot of bad data. So what I'm trying to say is, even if it is slow, even if you're not sort of rushing up to become like 15,000 followers, probably just 1,000 followers, or probably just 5,000 followers, but take your time, let it grow organically, and you will definitely get right people on yourself. If you're doing it right way, using the right content, that's what is the thumb rule.
Okay, Ankit. We have one more. I think
Ankit, why I asked Ankit, because he needs to endorse this. He's the guru right now.
Oh my God, please, nothing like that. No, but I fully endorse. In social media parlance, I would just say +1.
Exactly, yes. Very valid. I think we'll end with this last one. So with there being such a big question mark on the credibility of social media platforms like Facebook, the world wisening up to paid promotions, Facebook facing its problems of advertising and credibility, and big advertisers pulling out, the line of content and advertising blurring, how do communicators in 2020 communicate to audience via social media in the era of fake news? It's a loaded question to end
with. This is a separate panel discussion in itself.
I think so, but we'll give it a shot, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to share one tip, which is very effective, which I think a lot of journalists do. In fact, more auto journalists. So Varsha might probably endorse to this. Is of course social media and all is fine, but they still believe in the good old power of one-on-one connections, or at least one on 50, 60 connections. So make lists. Be it on WhatsApp or anything. So these are broadcast lists, like so. If you want to have, if you want to share your work. Or it could be anything, LinkedIn article, a brand new blog, post or something like that. You make WhatsApp lists and you connect with this, and you will always have your core group of your most influential people in the network. This should not be more than 15, 20 people, and literally just pick up the phone and speak to them one-on-one. Unfortunately, we've gotten so detached from picking the phone up and speaking to people. And of course, now you can't meet people for chai pe charcha physically. So even more reason to pick up the phone and speak to them. So just, this is one best practice that I know of.
Before we...
And just to add to that, because some of them are really huge from a social media influence perspective. So leverage that element, especially in 2020, knowing the year that it is, very critical to kind of have those relationships, what's what's the impact. And we all need sales at the moment.
Last piece of advice from each of y'all before we wrap up and invite Anubhuti back for closing remarks. And one line.
Sure, Varsha. This real life's not about likes and views and number of followers. It's really about the power of you. Use it carefully, use it wisely.
Okay, I'll go. Being silent is a massive privilege. Please be vocal. Please put your voice and opinion out there. Stand for the right causes. And definitely use this as a vessel of positive reinforcement instead of otherwise.
Okay.
I'll go next.
Sure.
I say social media is not bad. Try it out. It can be a lot of fun. Just do it.
Okay.
And from me, if I get an opportunity to meet a person rather than on a social media, I would prefer to be meeting them in person. I know that's something which has a larger ramification, but those real relationships are beyond social media.
Yeah, so I think great insights for everyone. I think hearing firsthand from all of you all, very different perspectives. But in the end, I would say the kind of takeaway that I got was be unique, be authentic, speak up. It's okay to have your own brand and represent a company or an agency. You know, try to be vocal, experiment. You don't have to always do it, but be true to yourself, right, is the key takeaway. And that is really the power of influence. Great. With that, I'll invite Anubhuti back. Any closing remarks? First, thank you all so much for your time, by the way. And
thank you for being such a great moderator, Yamini. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Really, thank you so much, Yamini, for this fabulous discussion. And I'm sure all our listeners are going away with a lot of learnings today. I would like to thank our panelists, Ankit, Vandana, Varsha, and Vineet for their time and insights today. Thank you to all our attendees for taking the time out this evening. I would also like to thank our partner, The Practice, for supporting this special edition. We will be back next Wednesday with another edition of Prime Time with a focus on regional communications. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Rep Today Mag for speaker and registration details. See you soon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye for now.
See you.